Okay, this is my speed run on how to win a tinnitus VA claim. Okay, I've gone through over 250 board appeals for tinnitus to figure out what was actually getting these things approved versus denied. Okay, so this is probably the most useful tinnitus guide you're going to find on the internet. Okay, I will cover what actually matters, what barely matters, how to not screw up your CMP exam, and what to do if you're denied, depending on why you were denied. Okay, this whole thing should take about 10 to 15 minutes. If you're filing for tinnitus, it will absolutely be worth your time. Let's get started. Okay, as a reminder, there are 3 things you need to get service connected. You need a current disability, you need an in-service event or cause, and you need a nexus connecting the two. Okay, first step before you do anything else, get a tinnitus diagnosis. Okay, don't file your claim and then 2 years later you found out you're denied because you didn't get a diagnosis. Because if you don't have a diagnosis, you don't have a claim. Okay, it's that simple. Okay, the closer to service you can get diagnosed, the better, but it's not an absolute necessity. Okay, I'll cover more on that later, but if you were diagnosed like years after service, your claim is not dead. Okay, the next thing you need to do is establish an in-service event. Okay, for tinnitus, the VA has something called MOS noise exposure. There's a ton of confusion on this, but all it is the VA classifies certain jobs and occupations as either high or low risk to hazardous noise. So depending on what your job was, you are more or less at risk for tinnitus, if that makes sense. Okay, if you have any level of MOS exposure at all, the VA concedes that there is an event that could have caused your tinnitus. Okay, MOS is not that important for tinnitus at all. Okay, I reviewed 250 decisions and literally like 5 were denied because of the actual event itself. Okay, that's how critically unimportant it was. As long as you have some documented MOS exposure, you are completely fine for this part. Okay, the VA concedes that the event happened. Okay, they don't necessarily concede that the event caused the tinnitus. Okay, that's an important distinction. Okay, but they concede that the event happened. Okay, the next thing you need to focus on is your symptom timeline. Okay, this is by far the most important part of tinnitus claims and where the vast majority of them either make or break. Okay, you've probably heard at some point that tinnitus is a subjective condition. Okay, and what that means is you're the only person who actually hears your ringing. Okay, you're the only person who actually experiences it. The VA can't directly measure it. Okay, because of that, the VA heavily relies on your own personal testimony. Okay, it's good to have in-service complaints, buddy statements from veterans if they notice you complaining of ringing, but by far what is most important is your personal statement. Okay, your personal statement is literally worth its weight in gold if you can get everything detailed and specific. Okay, you should first include, okay, this is important, first include exactly when the ringing started, or when you could remember it starting, okay? When you first remembered it, the specific hazard that caused it, and how your symptoms progressed until you got a diagnosis, okay? You should also include these things if they apply to you, okay? If you didn't complain of symptoms during service, you must explain this in your personal statement, okay? Veterans oftentimes have ringing or they have symptoms of tinnitus during service and they don't complain about it. Okay, and there's various reasons for this. Maybe they didn't know it was a disability. They didn't know it was called tinnitus. They just toughed it out. Okay, there's a million reasons, but you must explain why you didn't report them if that applies to you. Okay, this is extremely important down the line. Okay, and finally, you need to explain whether it comes and goes versus whether it's constant. Okay, most chronic tinnitus is either better or worse. It doesn't necessarily come and go, but that's not all the time. But you must explain specifically for you which one you fall into. Okay, and don't contradict yourself for this later on. Okay, if you have all of this evidence and all of it is consistent with each other, it is a very tough nut for the VA to crack. Okay, that is much easier said than done, however. Okay, because oftentimes there are small inconsistencies in your claim without you even realizing it. Okay, maybe you said it first, the ringing first started in 2008, and then you say it got bad around 2015. Okay, both can be true, but examiners might misunderstand it. Okay, other ones include, maybe you say it started since deployment versus started a few years ago. Constant versus comes and goes. Guys, it's not obvious stuff. Okay, we're not talking about blatantly lying at a CMP exam or knowingly fabricating evidence. Okay, the point is that you need to go above and beyond to give the VA the most consistent story possible, because again, that's what they are relying on for tinnitus. Okay, it's your personal testimony. Okay, this is where I would spend the most time on your claim as possible and be as most detailed and make sure you get it right before moving on to the next step. Okay, the next step in tinnitus claims is your CMP exam. Okay, the CMP exam for tinnitus terrifies a lot of veterans, understandably so. There's a lot of questions that will be asked. You can typically expect to be asked about when your symptoms started, how they started, military noise exposure. The purpose of the exam is to determine whether, it's for the examiner to determine whether they believe your tinnitus is connected to your time in service. Okay? I strongly recommend having your key evidence with you. Do not try to remember everything on the spot. Okay? I'm also going to add in that giving your key evidence to your examiner or a table of contents for them is also extremely helpful because they're much more likely to review it. Okay, are examiners supposed to review your evidence before the exam? Yes. Do they? Absolutely not. Okay, expect the worst. This doesn't guarantee they'll actually look at your evidence, but it makes it significantly more likely. Okay, once you've established this, you've submitted all your evidence, you've gone through your exam, you've said everything consistently, in theory, you should have all the basic pieces for a favorable nexus. Okay, unfortunately, negative opinions are still absolutely notorious. Okay, if you're denied, don't randomly start adding evidence. You need to really critically look at the reason you were denied to determine what to do next. Okay, there are 5 main reasons you will be denied for tinnitus or could be denied. Okay, 3 of them are completely invalid and easy to handle. 2 of them can be a little bit trickier. Okay, number 1, you weren't diagnosed during service. Okay, tinnitus claims are denied constantly for the reasoning of the veteran was not diagnosed during service. Okay, let me clarify. No in-service diagnosis is not automatically a reason to deny tinnitus by itself. Okay, there are plenty of veterans who never reported ringing. Maybe they didn't know it was a disability. Maybe they thought that it wasn't something they qualify for. Whatever the reason is, plenty of veterans just don't report it and then get diagnosed years later. Okay, if that was the sole reason you were denied, you should absolutely appeal it, and you should point to your consistent symptom timeline and reasoning you didn't either report your symptoms or didn't get diagnosed until later. Okay, the next reason you might be denied, this is also very common, your hearing tests were normal. Okay, this is another not valid reason to deny tinnitus. Okay, tinnitus and hearing loss often occur together, but they are not the same disability. Okay, there are plenty of veterans and people who have tinnitus but have completely normal hearing tests. Okay, this again, not valid to deny tinnitus. And what I would do is I would get a nexus letter from a audiologist, ideally one that's treated you, explaining why you have tinnitus without hearing loss. Okay, very simple, and if they can explain why the examiner's reasoning was wrong, that's even better. Okay, the next reason you might be denied. This one is a bit trickier, but you might be denied because your own evidence conflicts or because they don't trust your testimony. Okay, this one is different, and this sometimes can make your claim infinitely harder. Okay, this is why it's important on the front end, like I said, to get your evidence consistent from the start, get your story consistent from the start. This one's not fun. Okay, so maybe one record says tinnitus started during service, another 5 years later, whatever it is. Now you've created a credibility problem. Whether or not it was intentional or not, or whether it was the examiner's fault, it doesn't matter. That's how the VA sees it. Okay? For this problem, a nexus letter is not the solution. Okay? That establishes the nexus. Okay? That doesn't change whether or not you're credible to give your symptoms. Okay? If you have a legitimate explanation, okay, if somebody misunderstood something, if your examiner wrote down something that you didn't say, file a supplemental claim and explain it. Okay, if you just knowingly lied about your symptoms or you tried to fabricate evidence, you probably shouldn't be going through this anyways. Okay, I'm not here to help you cheat. I'm here to help you get the benefits you deserve. Okay, but if there's a legitimate explanation, you can appeal it. If not, don't. Okay, all right, the last reason, or second to last reason, okay, Sometimes veterans get denied because they didn't complain of symptoms during service. Okay, this one can be legitimately tricky, but it's still not a reason to deny tinnitus by itself. Okay, because again, plenty of veterans just don't complain of ringing in their ears during service for endless reasons. Okay, but on the surface, it can make your claim timeline a lot less convincing. Okay, because the VA often equates no complaint, no proof the symptoms existed at all. Okay, the key for this one is to ensure your personal statement, as we mentioned earlier, explains why you didn't report your symptoms if that's true. Okay, if you did report that and the examiner simply ignored it, then in that case, I would file a higher level review. Okay, I'll explain at the end exactly when to file each type of appeal, but for this one, file a higher level review. Okay, the final reason, okay, this is a minority of you, but sometimes the veterans can get denied if your tinnitus genuinely started years later. Okay, so maybe your symptoms didn't even begin in service at all, truthfully, and you didn't start developing them until years later. Okay, number one, if this is true, do not try to rewrite your history and suddenly claim it started during service. Okay, the VA will just immediately see the contradiction and deny you so fast. Okay, if it genuinely appeared years later, this can happen. Tinnitus can start years later. It's less common, but if this is you, what I would do in this case is also get a nexus letter. Okay, you should get a nexus letter from an audiologist explaining why your tinnitus specifically didn't start in service and was caused by service, but symptoms didn't come until years later. Okay, the opinion should address your theory and your exposure. Okay, I mean, don't buy a nexus letter from a shady company online. This is not the time to do that. Okay, and lastly, if you did everything right and the VA still denied you, which, believe it or not, does happen. Okay, the system is notorious for denying claims that should not be denied. Okay, I mean, that's why appeals exist. Okay, so maybe your diagnosis is there, your exposure is there, your timeline's consistent, you're credible, evidence is on the file. Maybe the VA just relies on a negative opinion anyways, no matter what you submit. Okay, that is when I would submit a board appeal. Okay, and really quick, since I didn't do it earlier, let me break down exactly which type of appeal to submit depending on your situation. Okay, so if, for example, if everything was already there and the VA screwed something up, I would file a higher level review. Okay, if you have new evidence you need to submit, like a nexus letter, or you need to add to your personal statement, submit a supplemental claim. Okay, and for these situations, if you've done everything right, been denied multiple times, that's when I would do a board appeal to fix it. Okay, they take a while. They're definitely a last resort, but sometimes they are necessary to get the benefits you deserve. Okay, tinnitus is just a 10% rating. Okay, but the biggest opportunity for tinnitus is the secondary conditions that come with it by far. Okay, some veterans get extremely high tinnitus ratings. Some veterans get extremely high VA ratings that all started with tinnitus. Okay, so maybe their tinnitus caused other conditions like migraines, anxiety, etc. But whatever it is, they can get an extremely high rating, ultimately starting by tinnitus. It's worth getting approved if you have the evidence. That's all for today.